Welcome into Rink-Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog. Make a play at Canada's choice for free casino games, sports odds, and poker strategies. David Alter joined by Paul Hendrick from Spain as we break down the Toronto Maple Leafs 5-game road trip. Henny, 2 days off. Can you remember the last time you had 2 days off following a Leafs road trip? I know I can't recall it, and having been on that trip, it was very much a welcome need for what really just felt like a busy trip, not just in terms of days and where they went, but just everything that happened in that span.
Yeah, it was crazy. And, you come off a game in Toronto, practice the next day, then fly cross country as the team did to Seattle. Big opening 5-game road trip victory. Certainly things optimistic before things actually got turned around and they were a little bit humbled up in Edmonton. But then a gutsy win in Calgary. I mean, that was an incredible game. For me, that was the most impressive of all the games, that 2-1 win in Calgary. And then Vancouver, what a dog's breakfast day that building is. What a dog's breakfast going out there. When I was covering the team back in the Pat Quinn era, they never lost in Vancouver. And then we went through a stretch of years where they never won. And that continues to this very day. I have no idea why. But it happens. And then to come out and win the way they did in New Jersey, certainly not junk and water bottles and beer cans thrown on the ice this time, but what a defining win for this team. And now they've got to come back to play this Edmonton Oilers team. Zach Hyman's going to be there. I'm not sure whether Jack Campbell's going to start. I haven't heard yet. There's probably going to be a welcome back video. But normally this is a fall flat on your face kind of game for a team that's come home after such a long time. But they've had some time off. They've had an opportunity to regroup. And home ice is their spinach to Popeye. They've got the third best home record in the entire National Hockey League. Tampa's got the second. It's important that Toronto secures home ice going into the postseason, especially in a series that's going to be so close. So it's a big, big game. And it's Connor McDavid. It's Leon Draisaitl. It's Zach Hyman. It's Nugent Hopkins, the Dave Semenko of his era. And the crowd's going to be revved up. It's been a long time since they've been home. I know you guys covering the club in the building are going to be looking forward to it. And I'll be watching here from Madrid, Spain.
Yeah, Henny, the Lightning, you mentioned them. They're not so hot these days. I mean, they did get a couple of empty net goals to tie it with the Golden Knights last night before losing it overtime. So they salvaged the point there. But yeah, I'm looking at it. They beat the Flyers, which nipped a losing streak in the bud, where they lost to the Hurricanes 6-0, the Sabres 5-3, the Penguins 5-4. The Panthers defeated the Lightning 5-1. The Penguins then defeated the Lightning again. It was like 5-game losing streak there.
They should have lost to Detroit, and would have lost to Detroit had it not been for their future Hall of Fame goaltender, who was absolutely outstanding. They're trying to find their way, and it's not easy. When you've been to as many Stanley Cup finals and have played as many games late as they have, it's not easy. I mean, if Toronto's going to win a first-round series against an opponent of this caliber, I think they might be getting Tampa at exactly the right time, and hopefully Ryan O'Reilly and the rest of the club's going to be relatively healthy as well, because it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, I can't believe this slide, but maybe that's when. I mean, it's catch-22. You don't want them being really hot. You don't want them being super cold and angry going in either, right? So, right. I guess like a 500, not too hot, not too cold would probably be the best situation, I guess. But hey, if the Leafs can catch them sleeping in whatever way, no one looks back and says how they were in the regular season before that playoff series started. They looked at what the nuts and bolts of it is. Did they get past or did they not get past?
Right.
Doesn't matter if they were the better of the team, like from a underlying statistical standpoint or whatnot. Did they get the job done? Yes or no? And that's what the Leafs are ultimately going to be judged on as they look to this presumed first-round series with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, looking at it from an in-house standpoint, as not so hot Tampa has been, I have a bit of concern. I mean, I always do. I try to look at things kind of balanced, and I look at some of the performances. And yeah, gutsy wins for sure, but there are lapses, and I don't know if you can just attribute it to the new guys or fatigue or whatever it is, but a lot of the things that got them to where they are in the standings haven't necessarily shown up for them in this stretch. And I wonder, Henny, how do you balance this? And is there such a thing as doing too much too quickly?
Well, at least they've got some practice in this, scenario, Dave. This is exactly where they were a year ago. Tampa chasing them for that second spot in the Atlantic. So this isn't anything new for them. You look at their strength of schedule, just the next week and a half. Edmonton Saturday, then Buffalo's here, and then Colorado, and then Carolina, Ottawa, and back-to-back nights, and the Islanders, and then Florida. All of those teams are competing for a playoff spot or an enhanced spot in their relative division standings. You've got to be on every night because you don't want things to spiral down as they can so quickly in the National Hockey League. I was surprised to look at their record this year, Dave, compared to last. And last year was an all-time franchise record, 115 points. And through 64 games this season, Toronto's 1 point better than they were a year ago. Now, I'm not saying they're going to get to 115 points again. There's no need for that. Just stay ahead of the Tampa Bay Lightning, secure that home ice advantage. But as tough as it is, and I understand what your concerns are and why you would have them, it's a tough league. It's so damn tough. Night in, night out. If it was Gary Bettman's goal to achieve parity, and I think it is, he has achieved that. And you've got a lot of teams, as I've mentioned, still in contention. And Toronto, as good as they are there for a reason because they've been consistent over a long period of time, despite an abundance of injuries to key personnel. Same situation right now. But I think this is a dress rehearsal for the postseason. And, a few weeks ago on a pod, we were talking about it being 7 weeks away. Well, it is now a month away. And every week that goes by, those games are just going to be peeling off the schedule. Play hard, play consistently. I'd like to see Alex Kerfoot score a goal. There are a few things I'd like to see, but I want them to continue to play well defensively. I want to see more of what we saw in that victory over Calgary. That, to me, was outstanding, as was the victory in New Jersey. So maintain grit and stay healthy, especially some of those key fourth-line guys. Noel Achari, he might be the biggest acquisition of the trade deadline. And Jake McCabe, what a natural fit he seems to be with TJ Brody, like a shutdown pairing. And I think a couple of guys that just make each other better. And I think they're just going to be so key for Sheldon Keefe come a month from now.
Yeah, and another guy who's going to be key, of course, is John Tavares, who missed the last game, and that opened the door for Sam Lafferty to kind of go into that second-line center spot, and he found some chemistry with Calle Yarncroke and William Nylander, and Sheldon Keefe is going to continue to go with it. And instead, you're going to see Michael Bunting with John Tavares, and they're going to rotate different wingers because they're going 11-7 with that duo being the line that is short. I wonder how you feel about the constant use of 11-7, and if you think that this becomes the norm going into the playoffs, because Sheldon Keefe has said many times he's hated. He even said it before implementing it for that first game with all these guys, but now it just seems like they're continuing to go with it here.
Yeah, I think it's okay right now. I know talking with Bob McGill, my longtime colleague, a former defenseman of 13 years in the National Hockey League, he hated 11-7, especially if you're a defenseman, especially if you're Justin Hall, you're the seventh guy. It just is hard to stay in sync. That said, you've got to do what you've got to do, given the situation that is. And it's a credit to what Kyle was able to do at the deadline. And here you've got Lafferty, playing with Nylander. There's another guy, Willie Nylander, who conceivably could be this team's most valuable player right now. I know you want Mitch Marner's probably it. He is it. But William is so key, and he makes those other guys better. And you've got an effective scoring line with the possibility of shutting down. There's a lot of space with Lafferty out there. William Nylander, I think, is going to thrive with that yet again. Kerfoot, they're trying to get him going, and he's got to get himself going, and given he's playing with Matthews and Marner. let's see how it works out here tonight. But I like this lineup for the most part. I think it's a good lineup against a very offensively explosive team like Edmonton, given the superstars they've got. But if I'm Justin Hall, I don't think I'm a big fan of it. That said, I run through social media. Justin doesn't have a lot of friends out there right now. I'll be honest, I know he can be the pinata from time to time, but he's an effective player, especially on the penalty kill. They're going to need players like him in the postseason. And he's a favorite of Sheldon Keefe's. There's no getting around that, although he has sat Justin out from time to time. I think Sheldon's going to count on Justin moving forward, his experience, and he's better maybe as a seventh defenseman rather than watching from up on top. But the bottom line is there's an abundance of riches, even with Ryan O'Reilly out of this lineup, and Sheldon's got some choices, not always easy on a night-to-night basis.
Yeah, I think a lot of Hall being the seventh guy was really just placeholding. If anything, I think Gustafsson is probably the actual seven in that regard. It's just, I think they need to give Riley a different look with someone brand new and see where that works. And then when they're not doing Riley, when they're doing Riley Gustafsson, or if they try Riley Liljegren, they also have Giordano Liljegren. So that's just kind of where Hall shakes out. But Hall, I thought, had a great game in that last one on the trip. And Hall gets a lot of the same kind of criticism as perhaps Jake Gardiner got, in the last 10 years when, all the underlying numbers are good. There's a lot of things to like, but then the eye test is when something happens in front of you and you're just kind of like, of course, or, he becomes an easy target that way. And so that happens. And so, and then when he's out of the lineup, Sheldon Keefe remembers all the good stuff, which is the penalty killing and all that other stuff that he relies on him for. So, 11-7, and it seems like it must be a necessity. But with John Tavares back, what did you make of Sam Lafferty now being potentially, Ryan O'Reilly's going to come back very soon before the playoffs, but, Sam Lafferty had that speed that maybe it's a newfound gold in that line that they found, that someone as fast as he is can perhaps help kind of bridge the gap until Ryan O'Reilly returns.
Yeah, he's a good hockey player, and as you say, on the forecheck, he's in quick, and you've got Young, Croc, and Nylander on either side, licking their chops with the opportunity that forecheck is going to generate, possible cycle, but time in their zone, the opposition's territory as opposed to in their own, and then with it comes opportunities to score. Lafferty is another one of these not underwhelming, I'm just saying maybe undervalidated trade acquisitions alongside Noel Achari, a couple of guys who the Leafs didn't have last year, have never really had in the postseason, unless you want to go back to the Darcy Tucker, Shane Corson type era where Toronto was able to go head-to-head with some really good hockey clubs and really get in their faces and in their minds. And I think for the likes of Lafferty and Achari can do that. But he's up there. I mean, that's vaulted territory to get an opportunity to play with William Nylander, and good for him. I think he's earned it. And again, Toronto comfortably right now in second place, and I think it's provided Sheldon Keefe with an opportunity to experiment and see how things are. I think they've got a damn fine idea as to what they want to do in the postseason against Tampa, but you've got a time now to play around a little bit with the lineup, toss the blender on, and see how things work, and maybe discover something that you didn't realize you quite had. And that's what we've got. It's just the way the Atlantic is right now and where Toronto is in the standings, I think.
Yeah, and it also made me wonder, when Ryan O'Reilly does come back, I wonder if, opponents in the playoffs, they target everything, and if his finger is healed or just healed, do they perhaps think about moving him on to the wing for some situations so that, that hand isn't a risk for things like face-offs and stuff like that, at least to start, right? So just because I feel like that is a thing that happens in the playoffs, where if people know, and it kind of, we always just talk about how we hate how, hockey's kind of stuck in this spot where they don't give injury reports, but in the playoffs, it's especially true because they just don't want to give the opposition anything. And I wonder if Sam Lafferty becomes that solution, at least for the draws in those particular situations when Ryan O'Reilly comes back. All right, Austin Matthews, he took that shot block against the Vancouver Canucks. At the time of the block, I haven't looked at the updated stats, but I was surprised to learn that he was or currently might still be the NHL leader among forwards in shot blocks this season. And
it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that really is not something I would have thought. And so obviously that one probably stung the most, but he continues to play. And I thought he looked pretty good against the last game. Sorry, I'm blanking now. It's New Jersey, the one that they played last. He at practice today, he says it still kind of stings a little bit, but he's able to persevere. But Henny doesn't look like it's kind of bothering him too much, and I imagine these couple of days would do someone like him a lot of rest, as it looked like he really found his gear again in that game against the Devils. I'm watching those shifts, and I see from the very get-go, at least in the first few minutes, he's on it. Maybe he feels that outside of him, it was thin at center, so he takes it upon himself to be a bit more dialed in, but he really seemed to be on a different level in that game.
Yeah, very much. And maybe hearing some of the criticism and comparisons to Connor McDavid. And listen, this is Connor's year. And I don't like comparing these hockey players. I don't like comparing Bobby Orr to Doug Harvey or Ray Bourque. They're all great players that you can compare if you want, but it's just not fair. They're just great players. And I think they're all lumped into the same category, maybe compared to some other players. But I think Austin's a little bit motivated by what he has heard. But, you look at his stats, he's plus 21. Yeah, you've mentioned his block shots, in all likelihood leading the National Hockey League, in 62 points in 57 games. And bit by bit, his shooting percentage is now up to 12.8. It's getting better. And 11 power play goals, alongside John Tavares, who's got, 12 power play goals. These are important things. But it was a motivated Austin in Jersey. And, when he scored that winning goal and just the celebration that went with it, I see him being a major factor in this final 4 weeks of the regular season, and games like we're going to see in Toronto where he gets an opportunity to go head-to-head with Connor McDavid. They're not taken lightly, especially given what Edmonton did to Toronto about a week ago. So I'm looking forward to it. Austin's the reigning league MVP. That just doesn't happen because your dad paid somebody off. He earned it last year. I know his goal totals are down, but there are other aspects of his game that are up. And we're seeing a more rounded superstar, and a case in point being those block shots you've talked about.
Yeah, it's certainly one that really sticks out to me about the other dimensions of his game that he's trying to round out, and perhaps that's where he can take it on another level come postseason in the next month or so. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll discuss what we think is Toronto's optimal look on defense. We've already touched a little bit on it. We'll get an update on Luke Schenn's status and look at Zach Hyman and Jack Campbell returning to Toronto. You're listening to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. Rink Wide Toronto, pre-game, post-game, every game. Welcome back to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's choice for free casino games, poker tips, and sports odds. And Henny, it is time for the Bodog line of the day. Toronto is playing host to the Edmonton Oilers, and coming off a big win against the Boston Bruins, it seems to be reflected in the odds. Toronto is just a minus 130 favorite, which is pretty narrow. It's close to even. Just a slight favorite there for the Maple Leafs, which, I mean, a couple of weeks ago before they played Edmonton on the road, I would have said that's kind of nuts. But given the way Edmonton played against the Leafs last week and the way they played against the Boston Bruins in Boston most recently, I got to think that this is fair. What do you think comes of this? Is it the Oilers' time to kind of go on a run here, or do the Maple Leafs kind of hit their stride at home?
Well, I mean, in reality, the Oilers are on a roll. They're coming off a huge, huge win in Boston. Toronto's coming back after their first home game. I think some smart money would be on Edmonton and to stay with that. But the other side says, well, you've got a motivated Toronto team. Given the fact of how soundly beaten they were in Edmonton a week ago, as I've mentioned in this podcast, they've got the third best home record in the entire National Hockey League. And their power play at home is third best at 27.9%. So they've got to generate some power play activity. I see Bunting and Tavares getting a wealth of riches on their right side, as the likes of Mitch Marner will be in there often, I would think, in terms of getting that extra ice time. So I'm going to say a 5-4 Toronto win. I'm thinking, right, from what I've heard over here in Spain, Matt Murray's going to start that game. He's going to be motivated as well. So I see a 5-4 Toronto win, and watch. It is going to be a low-scoring game, but not with the offensive talent both these teams have. And I've got complete respect for the Edmonton Oilers. They've really done a great job. But I think this is Toronto's game to win by 1 and 9-goal combination. So 5-4 Leafs on Saturday night.
So this will be a homecoming for 2 players. Obviously, we don't know if Jack Campbell is going to play or not, but if he does, and even if he doesn't, even if he's just dressed as a backup, I've got to think there will be some sort of video package for him.
Yeah.
I think they still do that if you're on the bench. I remember Jake Muzzin got his while he was hurt while watching from the press box in LA, if I remember that correctly. So they do that when they know you're in the building. So there is that. And Zach Hyman already had his video. Mitch Marner joked at practice today, which is true. However, that was the second Omicron game or first Omicron game, I can't remember, in January of 2022 when there was no one in the building. I think it was second. I think they had Ottawa first. And so even though Zach Hyman, the born and raised Torontonian, was back for the first time since signing a brand new deal with the Edmonton Oilers as a free agent, he really didn't have the fan homecoming and stuff. And so I got to wonder, Henny, what do you think the reception will be like when Hyman's announced or touches the puck for anything?
He's such a respected guy. He's such a good person. We know how great he is as a person. He's written 4 kids' books. He went to schools in Michigan and read to the kids. Tom Brady was never selected male athlete of the year at the University of Michigan. Zach Hyman was. I mean, this is a class act both on and off the ice. Like Vicky and Stu did a great job with him and his 4 brothers. Just fantastic. So I think it's going to be great. You've got to play that video for the fans. Like, I mean, before an empty arena, that just isn't warranted. And plus the season he's had. And as far as, Jack is concerned, he gave it all he had, and he was really good. I know there were some tough times for him. Game 7 against Montreal is a game he'd like to have back, but I don't hang Game 7 on him against Tampa whatsoever. He needed more help offensively up front, didn't get it, and I hope he gets a well-deserved round of applause. Who knows, maybe they start him to give him an opportunity to get motivated and get going, but given how Stuart Skinner has played, I think he should get the start. And I know he's not the most valuable player on this team, but given how tough a year it's been for Jack, Stewart's performance this season would certainly warrant team MVP honors for the Edmonton Oilers. So welcome back, Jack. Certainly welcome back, Zach. 2 fine people. And I don't think this is going to be a boo Bobby Orr situation as we used to see at Maple Leaf Gardens. This is far different from that. There's a great deal of respect for both these guys.
The only boo moment I remember at Maple Leaf Gardens was the booing Larry Murphy. Oh. I'm not going to go too deep into that.
Yeah,
that's the only boos I remember, and that was while he was a member of the team. So there is that. But let's go back to the current day Maple Leafs for a second. Of course, we talked about Eric Gustafsson. We've talked about all the different defensemen. We talked about Justin Hall in the last segment. Luke Schenn. There was a report earlier in the day that he was going to make his way back, and that would have been a nice little homecoming. I know a lot of Leaf fans are just excited for that day he plays at Scotiabank Arena for the first time in the second act of his Toronto Maple Leafs tenure. Sheldon Keefe said that's not going to happen. Like, he's still in Vancouver. I think they're still days away from when he and his wife is due to give birth to their third child. And so he has been skating on his own on a pad in Vancouver, just kind of staying up and getting ready for his conditioning. And they can afford to do that. They know the role he's going to be playing on this team. It's not by any means a top 4 spot, even though that's what he was doing with the Canucks. Henny, what's your optimal look right now when it comes to the playoffs? 6 or 7D, and how do you lay them out?
I think it's 6D. Again, as mentioned, I'm not a big fan of 7D. I think McCabe and Brody is a lock. I think it's the best shutdown possibility you can have. Riley and Hall, I hope they get things together. I just don't think Morgan's played well with Justin, but they certainly know how to play with each other. So I don't like that. And I do like Giordano and Liljegren. I think that's a really good third pairing. I see a possibility of Liljegren perhaps moving up. And I'm not sure where Justin Hall fits in, but I know Sheldon Keefe is going to fit him in somewhere. And the bottom line is, Dave, they're going to need all these guys. We can draw it out with 3 pairings for game 1 come mid-April. But the fact of the matter is they're going to need each and every one of these guys on an occasional basis as well, especially when things get tough, maybe in a road building, having Luke Schenn, the human eraser there, and the NHL leader in hits. They're going to need him as well. So I can only look at McCabe and Brody and go, I like that. And I want to see Riley paired up with someone here who will help him have a better season. It's been difficult for him, after injuries and whatnot. But, he's 30 assists. He's still moving on up. I think he can still help this team, obviously. And Giordano Lilly, I'm very happy with as well. I don't know where Gustafsson fits in, but, depending on how the power play operates, he may earn more time just given what he's able to do from the point. But right now, as you've mentioned, possibly the odd man out, the 7th defenseman with Hall likely slotting in with Riley. It's not optimum in my point of view, but I'm not coaching the Leafs.
Yeah, no, neither am I. And it will be interesting to see kind of how the Leafs kind of shake that out. And I think the next few regular season games will dictate a lot. But it's a show me situation for Timothy Liljegren. I think he's the one that's kind of in that same spot that kind of has to show that he deserves to be an everyday guy. He just got back in. He's going in again. Mm-hmm. And I'm very curious to see how he rises to this occasion right now. But before we go, we are recording this podcast on March 10th, 2023. March 10th, 2020, the Toronto Maple Leafs defeated the Tampa Bay Lightning 2-1 at Scotiabank Arena, and then didn't play again until the summer. Of course, that was the pandemic. It was also the last game that Paul Hendrick covered in the arena, whether it was home or road. What can you tell us about the craziness that was that game, and then when the lights went out right after that?
And there was no anticipation of the lights going out. It was an impressive game. I remember covering practice the next day. I remember working very hard to prep for the Nashville Predators, who were coming in the day after on March the 12th. Remember going down to the rink, getting ready to do a show, running into Chris Johnson in the hallway, and CJ just saying, I don't think we're going to be seeing anything for a while. And this just doesn't mean hockey games. This means everybody. It really escalated from November 11th onward, and then the 12th, the world shut down. And I'm in Madrid, Spain right now, and you think it was tough for us as Canadians. You weren't allowed to go on the streets anywhere in Spain. Just say in Madrid, you needed a license to walk your dog within 100 meters of where you lived. You had to show identification, and if you didn't, you were fined heavily. They were really shut down. It was dark in the darkest of ways over here. It didn't feel that way in Toronto, but it was just weird. It was empty. Watched a lot of Netflix and whatnot. I had no idea I was going to retire that following July, but the way circumstances worked out, I had an opportunity to come back. But I was ready to move on, and COVID really pushed me over the edge. My wife had some health problems and has done well, and we've been able to do a lot of things and take advantage of our good fortune. But that's where I was at. But when I remember my last game in Montreal, always thinking, is this going to be my last trip to Montreal? That's such a special place to play. But on November 10th, when they beat Tampa 2-1, I had no idea that was going to be it. And ironically, last December, my first time back in the building to see a game, and it was Tampa, and Toronto won that game 4-1, and a really great hockey game to be present at. And I was so excited to watch it as a fan. So it's a long, elongated look back on it, but boy, oh boy, Dave, 3 years has just flown by, albeit through some slow and dark times from March of 2020 onward.
Well, it's funny because for you, that's when you kind of decided to move on. That was kind of a moment for me to kind of, recalibrate and get back to what I was loving doing and finding my way back. And so, it just allowed me to kind of look at my current situation and say, I don't really want to be doing this. I have to get back. And even if it means doing some sacrifices or doing whatever, I got to find my way back. And so I was fortunate enough in January 2021 with the hockey news to be able to do that. And it's been a bit of a wild ride since, but it's been a wild ride for everybody as everyone kind of tries to recalibrate and kind of figure out what the landscape is. And that's why we bring a podcast. That's why we're on the road, home and road for all 82 games. We don't complain because, a lot of times I joke and I say it's a tiring trip and all that other stuff. It sure as hell beats the alternative to what we were going through 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Or what followed after that, which was not going to games or just kind of sticking around at home, doing nothing, and just kind of figuring out all that stuff and just not knowing what things are going to be like. And then when I actually went to an arena in 2021 and there were no people inside, it felt weird. I had friends walking me to work, which was going to Scotiabank Arena with nobody but media and essential staff permitted. It was a very weird scene. Certainly one I hope we never have to go through again. But like all things, everything's about perspective, and it makes you appreciate, the little things and the things that are important to you.
Right.
And so on that note, it's an important thing. It's an important message to kind of end off right there. But we'll be back with you the following day when the Toronto Maple Leafs host the Edmonton Oilers. Make sure you rate and subscribe on all of your favorite podcast platforms to Rink Wide Toronto, presented by Bodog, Canada's home for casino games and sports odds, where everyone goes to play. You've been listening to Rink Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.